Here's my messy workbench and the quote of the day. My father used to say to me, the only limit to your success is your own imagination. I actually believe that. Like, I'm still coming to terms with the fact that I might not be an Olympic figure skater. I'm sure there are barriers. I have just chosen not to acknowledge them. By Shonda Rhimes. I'm gonna have to Google Shonda Rhimes now. Okay guys, back out in the garage again. I know I say that quite a bit probably every time I kind of cut between scenes, but working on the Mustang again. I'm not showing a lot just because there's a lot of directions from Maximum Motorsports, probably a bunch of other YouTube channels, but I'm working on getting this whole front end back together again. So I do have the control arms in, got those bolted, or torqued down, I should say. I think they're torqued down to like 148 pound-feet or something on these bolts. Still moving pretty freely there. This one, they're supposed to just naturally sag, but this side does it a little bit better. Got the struts mounted back in place. I had put together the coilovers a while ago. I got these bolts torqued down to their temporary spec of like 55 pound-feet. These are 36. Got the strut mounted up in place and got that torqued down. I didn't torque on it too hard just because I wanted just to keep this snug. And the best way to get this nylock nut on is just to put a ratchet over the end of here, and luckily I had a 6-point socket. You could barely get that on there to get this bolted down, but those are snug down pretty good. I didn't like wrench on them super hard, but I think they got a good amount of torque on them just from what I did there. Next I'm gonna get these spindles in and get those all torqued into place. I don't think I need this plate that's on here because the passenger side one doesn't have that plate on it, but I'm going to get those mounted up in place. I'm debating if I should replace this tie rod in because it's snug in there, but it does just droop right away. This side you actually have to kind of push the tie rod around to get it to move, but it does feel snug, like I can yank on it. It doesn't feel like there's any free play in there, so I think it should be okay. So someone else can tell me if I'm wrong, but this car will come apart again this winter. Again, my whole plan is I'm going to start piecing this car together and get this engine fired up before the snow flies outside. And today is October 19th. I should remember that. It's my son's 22nd birthday today, so happy birthday, Owen. Hope you're having a good day. I know we went out for lunch today with him and one of his buddies, and now he's out doing some indoor go-karting with some friends, so he's out having fun. And I'm out here in the peace and quiet with the shop supervisor. One more quick little update before I slap the wheels on here. So I did get my bump steer kit, everything in here kind of the way I had it before, kind of loosely set. It's not tightened up, but I got all the spindle to strut bolts tightened. I'm supposed to torque the ball joint here, but there's not really a good way to get a socket on there, so if someone has a pointer on how to actually torque this, but I just try to hang on to things as firmly as I could with a wrench and just put about all my might into that bolt. I think it's supposed to be 120 foot-pounds if I'm remembering right from what I was looking up. So don't quote me on that, but I did see that LMR does have a nice listing of torque specs for like all the stuff on the front end, on the rear end, for all the suspension and everything. So I'd say double check there. Got everything in on this side. I'm gonna get these rotors back on here and the wheels and hopefully get this thing back on the ground here. So that's my goal for before I shut down for the night. I do have to bag and tag some parts here. Oh, I should show, I had so putting this nut, this nylock nut on this ball joint, this it actually started spinning. On the other side, the ball joint was firm enough that it didn't even spin. So on this side, what I ended up doing was taking, these spacers came along with, gosh, I'm trying to remember what they came along with. I don't know if they came along with these control arms or what, but I ended up not using them, but I'm glad I kind of hung on to them because I stuck both these in here so that I could just get this ball joint stud started and pulled that up since it's a tapered fit there. So I got that pressed up into here with both these spacers, so it held that snug in there. Pulled the nut back off of there and pulled these two little spacers back out and then ran the nut back down, and it seems to all be good now. Yeah, as you can see here, the bump steer kit is not tight in here. I want to get this thing back on the ground, see how level this stuff is sitting. I did reach out to Maximum Motorsports and got a response, and depending on how low the car is sitting, if it's an inch lower, then you use the bottom bolt hole. If it's 2 inches lower, you use the top bolt hole. But they said the main thing is that you want to try to get this control arm parallel to the ground as much as possible and have the tie rod parallel to the ground as much as possible. So I want to get this thing back on the ground. I'll probably end up trying to find something to sit on the front of this car to basically add some weight to mimic what the hood, fenders, coolant in the engine, radiator, all that stuff is going to be. So, and then go from there. All right, ladies and gents, she's back on the ground again. So excited. I need to adjust that rear back down at some point here, but I got to get all the rear put back together anyway and get everything all torqued on the back there. And everything's good up here on the front. I did just put 3 lug nuts on just to have wheels on it, and got it back on the ground again. Those control arms do look pretty parallel. I think if I use that lower hole, they'd be slanted down to the inside of the car. So I'll have to mess around with these bump steer kits and try to get everything kind of squared up there. It's weird, it looks better on that side than it does on this side. But I'll get that all figured out. Just happy to have it on the ground again. I forgot how low this thing sits now. Even, well, without the hood. The hood will make it look a little taller, but I got this thing pretty slammed right now. It's probably, if I had to guess, 1.5 to 2 inches lower than what it was OE. Well, probably more than that with the 4-wheel drive that these cars have stock, the 4-wheel drive ride height, which kind of about what it was right there. Maybe a little bit lower than that, but I got the coilovers kind of wound up on the back here right now, so I could actually drop those down a little bit. But it's coming together well. All right, so the shop supervisor and I are out just kind of dinking around with stuff, setting the suspension down. Let me see here. I think this is as tight as I can get the spring on the coilover, so that when it's just loose under the car or drooping, when the suspension's drooping, there's no slop in the spring. This guy, I actually set the spring perch down so there's about a 2-inch gap between the top spring perch, and it's this super nice, super aggressive fit here. So this is just a 17x8, like 96 Mustang GT wheels. So it's a stock 245 45 17 on here, and I got it set down so that there's pretty much no fender gap here. Of course, like I said, my intention, my plan is to wide body this car so I can fit like an 18 by 11 inch wheel on here. So yeah, this fender is probably going to come out about 3 inches, and I really want to try to build like an all steel fender flare. So I'm no body man, but I'm willing to be patient and learn and figure something out for doing these fender flares front and rear. I got another set of fenders behind the garage, because what I really want to do is take this fender opening and just move it ahead that 3 inches basically. Or maybe I'll just leave the fender opening a little bit longer too. So maybe I'll move this back edge ahead 2 inches and move the front edge ahead 3 inches or so. But I guess that's the first time that thought's kind of crossed my mind. So I'm kind of thinking out loud here. But just kind of sitting, playing around, kind of getting this car at, I think this is the ride height-ish that I'd like to go with when the car's all said and done. I should do some measuring and make sure it's sitting level front to rear. It almost, from this angle, it almost looks like it's sitting lower in the rear, but definitely don't want that. But I'll do some playing around here. The main thing I wanted to do was getting the car sitting level so that I could play around with the bump steer kit and everything there. And right now it almost looks like I could even bring that tie rod up on this side. That control arm looks like it's sitting pretty level there. So I'm going to do some playing around, some figuring around. Can't really raise that steering rack up anymore than what it is right now with that oil pan where it's at. So I'm gonna have to figure that out, get that bump steer kit set. So I've been messing around a little bit. I think it's been a day or so since I recorded last, but I did end up, I set all the suspension pretty low, put the front end even lower, thinking that it would be kind of fun to do that. But then I just can't get enough length out of the bump steer kit. It pretty much run into the rim. In order to get that front tie rod parallel with the ground, which according to my email with Maximum Motorsports, you want to get the control arm as level as possible and the tie rod arm as level as possible. At least that's what I was told there. So if someone else knows any differently, please feel free to chime in. But I had this rear suspension pretty much sitting so the fender was pretty much on the tire. And I did jack that up, but now I did mount the front fender on here, and I wish, I'll post a picture of it, but I did loosely mount this fender on and put the hood on it just to kind of get myself excited and motivated. But it was looking pretty good. But I got the car sitting up about an inch from where it was sitting at its lowest. I had it sitting pretty low. That back fender was pretty much on the tire. And if this tire could have actually tucked into the fender, it would have. But it was actually kind of holding the fender up when I was just kind of draped it over the side of the car here. And then, like I said, then that tie rod was really angled up, so you couldn't get it parallel to the ground. So I think after talking a little bit with my son, who for a 22-year-old kid, he's got a lot of sense to him, but kind of came to the conclusion, it's like, well, I'm kind of purpose building this car to be fast and handle good, and the purpose of it is not to be low to the ground. Of course I want it low, thinking it should handle better, but just with the geometry of everything here, the IRS, and it really puts that control arm and angles that up quite a bit in the back too for that IRS. So I think I'm going to try to keep things just a little more level. Got the car sitting kind of level right now, and got this at a point where this tie rod is actually pretty much level here now. Man, there's a little more light on this side of the car. But that tie rod is sitting pretty much level, and the control arm is actually angled down towards the outside of the car. So what I'm thinking now is just the way I want the suspension to travel and everything to work. I think I want it instead of, I think if with it set up on this upper hole on the K-member, it's angled down towards the outside of the car ever so slightly. I think if I switch it to the lower hole, it'll be angled up ever so slightly. But I'm kind of thinking maybe that's the preferred route. So what I'm going to do is get this car back up in the air, although I don't want to do it, or I'm not excited about doing it, but I'll have to loosen up the power steering rack because the lower hole is pretty much ahead of that tie rod in there. Well, I've been out here probably a few hours. I think this is 3 nights in a row now. Just kind of messing around with different suspension settings. Probably getting way too into the weeds with all this, but I figure maybe if I do a little bit of extra homework now, it'll be easier to set up in the future. And this is my first time doing all this, messing around with this kind of stuff. So I'm learning as I go. But I think I'm doing pretty good here. Like I said, I think this will be about the right height I want. These are pretty stiff springs on here. I forget what they are. I'll have to look back. I got it written down somewhere on a computer or something. I can't remember if these are like 650 or 700 pound-inch springs. Like I said, I wanted the car to be pretty stiff and ride pretty flat, handle corners well. So that's what Jack at Maximum Motorsports recommended for this car. Or maybe that's what they are on the back. Gosh, don't quote me on that. I'll have to look it up and let you know later. But what I'd been messing around with last night, like I said, these control arms here, I wanted them to sit level to the ground as much as I could. So I ended up getting the car kind of set up maybe a little higher than I was hoping to. But then again, like I said, I don't want it to be a low rider. I want it to be a good handling car. So I'm going to compromise having a super low ride height for getting things kind of squared up here. So, as you can see here, these control arms are pretty close to level. They're just ever so slightly angled up. You can see that bubble's just off to the center. And but if you put it up on that upper bolt hole, it's angled down quite a bit. And these, now I'm going to call Gary out at Castle Customs. If any of you guys listen to the Rolling in My 5.0 podcast, I know Gary always talks about how if he doesn't get something finished and it's on his mind, he has to get up and do it. So that's what I'm doing here. I ended up taking one little spacer out of this bump steer kit on this side before I torqued it all down. And I thought, well, that'll get this thing sitting pretty level. And now it's, well, it needs to come down probably about that width of that spacer that I took out of there. So, thanks, Gary. I'm staying in the garage for about an extra 20, 30 minutes, whatever it takes to pop this wheel back off. And those things are torqued down according to the Maximum Motorsports directions to 154 foot-pounds. So you about work up a sweat working, getting those bump steer kit tie rod ends bolted in. So I'm going to pop this one off. I got this spacer is the one I took out. So I'm going to pop that back in there. And I'll have used up all my spacers for this thing. So it would have been nice if I could have got that power steering rack up that half an inch or even an inch if you could, and got rid of having such long bolts in there and all the spacers in there. But I don't think it can even go up maybe more than 1/4 of an inch before that rack hits the oil pan. Again, this is pretty much this is the stock F-150 engine yet. with the stock oil pan. Again, it's a Gen 1 truck engine out of a 2011 F-150. So that's what I'm doing tonight before I go in the house for the night. I think I'm going to take the evening off tomorrow and